Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest RightScale webinar. Today we're going to focus on building and managing a hybrid cloud and try to dive in specifically into what's real today and make some recommendations here. As usual, we're going to start off with just a few polls, so they should be on your screen momentarily here. I think there's going to be 3 polls today. If you wouldn't mind just going ahead and answering those, that would be great. And the answers are going to be displayed for everyone, so you can get a sense of who the audience is today. So the first poll should be launching here in just a second. All right, looks like the first poll around are you using private or public today? Pretty good mix. So it looks like half of you are already doing something in a public cloud, and then about a quarter aren't doing anything yet. Great. So this will be a very helpful webinar for that group today. Next poll should be up here in just a second. This one is more about why you're thinking about a hybrid cloud. So what's the use case that's causing you to really dive into this? Okay, looks like we got the tallies in from there. All right, so it looks like 41% are looking for that excess capacity use case, so the ability to burst. Great. Well, that's perfect. You'll see an actual demo on how that's set up here a little bit later today. Okay, that concludes the poll, so thanks again, everyone. Let's get started. So I want to quickly introduce our panel today. I'm Josh Frazier. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at RightScale. Happy to be joined today by Michael Cote. So he's an industry analyst with RedMonk, as well as Peter Ulander, who's Chief Marketing Officer at Cloud.com. A couple housekeeping items. As usual with all our webinars, we'll be doing Q&A throughout the webinar. Matthew Small is going to be staffing the Q&A logs, so go ahead and ask a question at any time through your GoToWebinar console, and we'll get those answered through the console as well as address many of them on air. Feel free to ask questions at any time, as well as when the webinar ends, provided there are still questions coming in. We're happy to stick around a little bit longer and continue to field those. If we don't get to your question, apologies. We'll follow up after the webinar with a specific answer. As with all our webinars, the archive, both audio and the slides, will be available on rightscale.com/webinars. It usually takes about 1 business day to get that post up there, so feel free to go and download the webinar tomorrow. So today's agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Michael first. He's going to take us through some industry perspectives. Then we're going to quickly introduce Cloud.com and RightScale, and spend most of the time diving into the basic building blocks and considerations when you're looking to create a hybrid cloud, and then what to think about when it comes to managing that hybrid cloud once it's set up. We'll also spend some time taking you through a live demonstration. So we'll take a look at a Cloud.com-based hybrid cloud within RightScale and talk about one of the common use cases, which is what I mentioned earlier, around how to take advantage of additional resource pools when you require excess capacity. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Cote with RedMonk, who's going to take us through some industry perspectives. Michael?
Well, hello there. I'll keep my introduction short. As was said, I'm Michael Cote with RedMonk, and you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Cote. So you can heckle me during this. It'll be very exciting for me, and you can check out further stuff that I've pulled from in this short talk over at peopleoverprocess.com. So when looking at a new technology, as this slide here says, I really like to start out with kind of getting a baseline for what exactly your expectations are and what kind of you're expecting from that technology, and more importantly, like what just sort of a model that you can operate with it. And as we'll get into, there's so many different modes and adjectives and ways you can describe cloud that it's good to get a context to understand that. And I like to use one of the more common things. I would call it a burger because it's a 3 layers, and I enjoy lots of food stuff. But I always like to think of the SPI layer, or software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. And most of the stuff that we'll probably be discussing is somewhere in the middle of platform and infrastructure, if you will, sort of infrastructure or resources that you're using. And what's interesting, I'm not going to get into extreme detail about what those are, but the way I like to think of it is that you've got the application layer and the middleware layer, and also the sort of the server layer, if you will. And again, this is sort of, what would you say? It's sort of an imperfect model, but it tends to work to just start thinking about it. So the characteristics of cloud computing, so if we've got this analogous burger to think of, is there tends to be a lot of, on the consumption, and a lot of self-service models of it. So if you think about the way that you sign up for a hosted email account, or that maybe you use a popular SaaS like Salesforce or Google Apps or something, if you think about it, it's completely self-service. There's no humans involved in that provisioning. And that's a huge important thing for much of how cloud computing is consumed, that there's less people involved. And part of that is the elasticity you'll hear about. And to me, what the elasticity gets to is the dynamic nature of how cloud stuff is working. And so you've got nodes or resources running around in there. And not only do they scale up, as you more popularly hear, but also they can be scaled down. So you're only using what you need at a given time. And that becomes important for the next aspect, which is that the way you pay for it is that it's metered. And you're only really paying for what you're using. You're not sinking all of your costs up front to buy a dedicated server. You're just monitoring what's happening there. And the next important aspect that's important is that you're using lots of standardized services versus customized things underneath it. So you may not have a lot of exotic different hardware or resources, but you're really looking at just using standardized things, which helps with those two items. So next is thinking about the way you slice up the types of cloud computing that you have. And that's looking at public, private, and hybrid. And hybrid, of course, is the subject here. But public cloud computing is the traditional idea of stuff just hosted over the internet, accessing your resources over a network. And of course, private is usually what it implies is that you're running it on-premise. And in some strange areas, it also implies that you have something called a public-private cloud, or just a more secure cloud. But for the most part, it means you're running cloud-like practices and technologies on your own data and your own hardware. And what's interesting in the relevant here is thinking about hybrid cloud, where you're mixing any two types of clouds or two pools of resources. And more or less, this usually means using public cloud resources and private cloud resources. But it can also mean using two different public clouds or two different private clouds. And there's interesting scenarios that we'll go into that you need to take into account there. And finally, there's two other aspects when thinking about cloud computing that it's good to think about. And that's if you're using workloads or jobs or long-running applications, the type of process you're running. And finally, who the end users are and who owns the cloud resources, whether it's an IT department centrally controlling it or end users controlling it. And what we see a lot of at RedMonk is that cloud computing resources are important for line of business people who want to get around IT. So let's just look really quickly at what some reasons for cloud computing are. I think we've advanced the slide already, so that's fantastic. And the main thing that draws people in are managing costs, usually towards costs being lower. And what also ends up happening is not only are you managing your costs more frequently, but you're also looking at getting flexibility. All that elasticity and dynamism are essentially getting towards the ability to deliver more functionality more frequently and provision resources more quickly. So because you can deliver IT more quickly, you can actually have more flexibility to do more, if you will. And this is what we start to see at RedMonk with the more mature users of cloud computing, is they're focused on the new abilities that cloud brings them, in addition to the better cost. And of course, there's some better management that you tend to get with cloud computing, simply because you're sort of forced to manage and automate everything. So if we could go to the next slide. So when you're considering using a hybrid cloud approach, and again, here mostly what I'm concerned with is combining together public and private cloud, but it could be spanning two different clouds. The first thing that you want to think about when you're using a hybrid cloud approach is to start dividing up the various processes that you have, the workloads, the applications. And one of the first vectors that you look at is to think of what process and policy you need to apply to where you can run these applications. Are there regulations and security risks as far as your data needing to be fully under your control, or can you put the data under someone else's control in the public cloud? Another important aspect is to think about the cost that you already have with your on-premise cloud, if you will, or infrastructure. And the idea is that you don't always have a real baseline of what your actual costs are. So if you're trying to control your costs or reduce your costs, it's very important to know what you're already paying for something. Otherwise, you might end up spending more, or spending less. Spending less would be great, but you might be spending more than you already have. And so this is an important aspect because you might have already spent a lot of money on an existing infrastructure and hardware that you could create a private cloud of, and you may end up paying more by having a public cloud, essentially. And another aspect to pay attention to is thinking about the assets, the services, and the applications that you're running. And a lot of these will be relevant to cloud computing legacy applications that really are not cloud ready, if you will. So it's important to know what you can actually put in a cloud versus what you need to use traditional IT for. So we could go to the next slide. So when you're looking at the transformation into a hybrid cloud or any type of cloud, I think it's important to keep some goals ongoing to kind of check yourself to see if you should be doing more, if you should pull back the effort, just evaluate how it's going. And one of the things that a lot of people mentioned to me when I've spoken on the topic is to really make all of your stuff as cloud ready as possible. And there's a lot of goals here that go over this, but one way to think about this is, let's say you're spanning a public and private cloud, and if your private cloud went down and you only had your public cloud part, how could you recover from that? So how can you actually use one of the clouds you're relying on for high availability, or HA? And it's important to start thinking about how all of your services are cloud ready, and if they can go between the public and private cloud or the different clouds. Even if they don't need to, situations might arise where you want to take advantage of that. And another important aspect to look at is to always evaluate how much lock-in you're going to get versus the sort of quick and easy in the cost controls versus the benefits. Because with any platform, there's some degree of lock-in, if only the time it takes to move to a compatible platform. So it's important to know how stuck you are with one platform. But you don't want to avoid that at all costs. You want to know what you're getting in return. So always ask what you're getting in return for any lock-in that you perceive. And finally, one of the things I like to tell people is when you're moving to a cloud-like infrastructure, if you're not able to deploy services in hours, if not minutes, versus weeks, then you're not really getting to one of the benefits of cloud computing. And again, that's delivering services a lot more fast, a lot more quickly than you would with traditional IT. So always be on the lookout for how fast it takes you to deploy any service or run any job, or anything you're using that infrastructure for. And finally, as will be relevant to a lot of this webinar, like any piece of IT, you still need to manage the hybrid cloud or the cloud that you have. It's just, there's no magic about clouds being managed automatically for you. You still need to monitor them and be able to report on them and see what's going on. So if we can move to the next slide. So this is some of the early guidance, if you will, that we've collected at RedMonk for using hybrid clouds. And a lot of them you'll see are kind of reflected in the architectural goals. But one of the interesting effects we've seen with any sort of cloud use is that using cloud tends to be sort of viral in your tool chain. So you might be only deploying to cloud, but your developers start to think of how they can move their tool chain into cloud-based things to do cloud builds or host their project management software there. And so it's good to be on the lookout for where else in your tool chain or the life cycle of your service you could use cloud-hosted things. So then looking at private cloud, the things that motivate people to use private cloud and where it's successful is if they're really focused on the speed of the service. And so it could be the case that just your own infrastructure on your own network is much faster than something you might use access over the network, and it could not be the case as well. And also very famously with financial applications, actual proximity to trading data that they use to make very quick trading decisions tends to matter for those types of applications. So if there's a certain amount of network latency that you can't have in your system, then using a private cloud might certainly be better than a public cloud. And of course, as I've mentioned already, there's privacy concerns and highly regulated data that may just be easier, though technologically equivalent, to run on your own cloud. For example, some of the higher levels of PCI compliance from talking with people are a little easier to do in traditional settings than they would be in public clouds. So that's hopefully a problem that's being fixed sometime soon. And then, of course, there's legacy systems that just won't work in publicly hosted clouds so well. And finally, looking at public cloud scenarios, things that tend to work really well are, people will call it bursting or jobs or batch jobs, sort of these finite things that you send up to be processed and come back. As an example, going over inventory reports or analytics over data or something like that tend to be well. And also things that are already external-facing applications, SaaSes that you want to host, for example. Collaborative software, mobile, and lots of line of business things, maybe not corporate-wide stuff, but things that groups work. And there's a lot of use for dev and QA labs. And with any new technology, a new application that you're using tends to favor, a greenfield approach tends to favor new applications if you don't have legacy concerns. And finally, as I mentioned, even though cost may be something that brings you into cloud computing and something that you want to look at, especially with hybrid cloud, it's also important to realize what are the actual benefits you're getting as far as being able to deliver services faster, and more importantly, something a little more obscure, but being able to observe the software in action and get feedback about features users are using and what users are happy about, and to feed that into the whole process of the service delivery you're doing, really focusing on quality of service and customer service, or some of the uniquer things that cloud technologies can deliver you. So it's good to focus on just more than cost and figure out how else you're benefiting. And with that, that's the really fast and quick context and baseline for cloud computing and hybrid cloud. And I'll hand it back over.
Great, thanks, Michael. Really appreciate the perspectives there. You know, we love that word agility too, and that's a perfect segue into really summarizing what is hybrid cloud, what is this really all about, and we simply characterize this as workload deployment freedom. So it's about using multiple resource pools, not looking at this as a replacement strategy, but a way as complementing what you're already doing. And with that, kind of how we encourage customers to really think about the lay of the land here is don't focus on a single application. Look at your whole portfolio. The reality, as I'm sure you'll find very quickly, is not every app is well suited for cloud-based architecture. But we can guarantee you, companies large and small, no matter who you are, you do have at least an application that is. So this is about looking at your entire portfolio, and then based on your unique filtering requirements, use cloud architectures to deploy that application wherever it makes the most sense, whether that's a public cloud, a private cloud, or in the case of using Amazon's public cloud resources, their virtual private cloud. So this really is the key to the flexibility that you're going to see in the demonstration. It's using hybrid cloud to have workload freedom to best meet your specific requirements. The realities are that, you know, this is not easy. And, you know, RightScale and Cloud.com, we've been living this for about 2+ years now, which is stitching all these different cloud resource pools together is very, very difficult. And without going into the nitty-gritty details here, the things that you'll find if you've looked at multiple providers is the APIs are different, both in syntax, but more importantly, the behavior of those resources. Even from a single provider like Amazon, if you look at those 4 different regions, they are different in terms of what features and services they have available, as just one example. The next key difference, particularly when you're looking into private cloud architectures, is the various different networking and storage configurations also are different. Hypervisors, of course, matter when you start getting into what workloads and software stacks you're going to run. And then the whole notion of how metering, billing, reporting, all the necessary business aspects are constructed are different as well. So a big, big challenge when you want to leverage hybrid cloud environments is abstracting away these lower-level differences and providing a normalized experience with a consistent methodology to access more than one resource pool. You'll see that in action with RightScale. That's exactly where we focus. But we just wanted to first highlight some of the key pain points because it is important to understand because a lot of the confusion in the marketplace has these clouds all appearing to do the same thing, and the reality is they're anything but that. So I want to now turn it over to Peter, who's going to do a brief intro on Cloud.com.
Thanks, Josh. So Cloud.com, real quick, we are a software provider. We build a platform that enables both service providers and enterprises to build and manage their own cloud infrastructure. We were founded a couple of years ago, and today we have a number of customers around the globe, both on the private and public side. One of the big advantages we have specifically as it relates to the hybrid cloud offering is we partner with companies like RightScale to create essentially a turnkey, seamless environment that enables users to really kind of, get that abstraction layer at the highest level so that they can manage their resource pools, whether they be on-prem or off-prem. The biggest benefit that we have today for our customers from a differentiated technology perspective is really focused around the simplicity and scale allocated with our platform. Today we have some of the largest private clouds in production around the globe.
Great, thanks, Peter. And now quickly introducing RightScale for those of you that are not familiar. So RightScale is a cloud management system. We're proud to say we are the #1 management system in the market today. We've been doing this for quite some time, specifically a month after EC2 launched. So we were there at the very beginning. And since then, we're proud to say that we have launched and managed over 2 million servers. At this point, we passed the 2 million mark about 4 weeks ago. And RightScale is actually the management platform behind the largest production deployments on the cloud to date. So you can see just a sampling of some of the customers there. Many of you, if you followed the press, you followed such marquee customers and stories like Zynga, for example, using Amazon Web Services today. The way they are accessing and managing their deployments in the cloud is through our platform. It's a complete management system that focuses on all aspects of deploying and managing in the cloud, from the initial onboarding all the way through to a whole host of security and compliance roles and procedures that you can set up, all applied to multiple cloud resource pools, whether those be public or private.
So let's talk a little bit about how we work together, because I think that's kind of the complete solution. Together, Cloud.com and RightScale provide a purpose-built solution that enables private enterprises to build their own cloud that seamlessly manages and accesses resources both locally and remote. We've spent a lot of time integrating our technologies, right? The key point here is it's not about building blocks that are not integrated. We've done a lot of things to where we're providing an engine underneath RightScale that enables the private cloud to integrate with a lot of the public resources, the Amazon or some of the other cloud resources available. We share general business alignment around economics, agility, performance, and quality of service, and we're very much focused on delivering that Amazon compatible hybrid environment. The reality is today there's a couple of options that you can do. On one side, both of our platforms have a freemium model where you can download our code and get up and running with the cloud and access the developer edition of RightScale. Or as many of our joint customers have done, there's also the ability, as you move into production, to enter into commercial agreements where we help you architect, build out, and manage your hybrid cloud environment.
And I think the key thing to note here, Peter, is Cloud.com is really an enabler. So RightScale does not integrate directly with bare metal or the hypervisor. It requires an API extension, and that's exactly what Cloud.com does. So whether you're an individual company or whether you're a service provider, when using Cloud.com, you're standing up a RightScale-ready cloud resource pool that we can take advantage of.
So let's talk a little bit about how you actually get started. I think both Michael from RedMonk as well as you, Josh, you talked a little bit about identifying the workload. This has to be an extension of your existing IT strategy. It's not a replacement model. So identifying the right workloads to start with, and then allocating something either for a pilot or for a small-scale deployment is probably the best thing to do. Most of our customers, for the most part, you can use any hypervisor. Most of our customers actually start off with open source, so a KVM or a Zen-based solution. Download the code, register with RightScale, and kind of get going. Now, I kind of skipped over those last 4 pieces because I figured let's actually walk them through the building blocks, starting with that base framework and extending out to RightScale, if that works, Josh.
Yeah, I think a key reminder to everyone in the audience here, start small. We're not looking to boil the ocean here. This is a very iterative process. It's really important that you're able to identify a specific workload and the key business benefits for your particular organization. There's a lot of confusion and a lot of misunderstanding of where the right place to start is. We like to encourage customers, find a workload to start with. Identify what you're hoping to achieve by standing up this hybrid cloud environment, and then be prepared to iterate, right? And let the findings kind of take you to that next step.
So let's talk about the building blocks, starting at the baseline. You mentioned the API for the data center, and that in many cases is what we view Cloud.com's cloud stack to actually be. We start off with general purpose commodity infrastructure, whether it be general switching, server nodes. We actually, most of our customers, when they get started with a proof of concept, it's taking 4 or 5 general purpose servers, sticking them up in a rack, and kind of getting the baseline environment established. Our technology basically starts by providing that orchestration that pulls together all of these resources, sets up the service levels, and enables you to actually extend your virtualized environment into something that can be managed through a self-service portal. Right? We build in the business logic on top of that so that you know where the workloads are, what the user accounts are, some of the basic level policies, and then we expose our API for RightScale to actually start to enable a private cloud environment within the enterprise.
Great, thanks, Peter. So once Cloud.com is enabled, and it really is fairly straightforward, and we've done POCs with Cloud.com that have taken a matter of several hours, not even a full day, to stand up an initial proof of concept private cloud resource pool based on Cloud.com. Once you have that stood up, and once you've completed the registration process with RightScale, you can take advantage of this abstraction layer management approach to the RightScale platform. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means, because if you referred back to the pain point slide that we talked about earlier, you'll find that these various different resource pools all behave differently, the construct is different, the feature set is different, and without an abstraction layer approach and a specific methodology that addresses those differences, you'll find that a lot of the business benefits you'll get out of these cloud architectures are quickly consumed by the overhead of deploying in these multiple different environments. So RightScale from day one took a different approach towards deployment methodologies in the cloud using something we call server templates. And the way to think about server templates is simply a definition of a server that lives at an abstraction layer on the RightScale platform above the specific resource pools that it's going to deploy in. So the net result for a customer is you can take a single definition and deploy into multiple resource pools from multiple different cloud providers. Each server template relies on what we call a multi-cloud image. Those images are typically clean base images that just have the OS and the RightScale agent called RightLink. And RightScale is taking upon itself the onus of building, maintaining, bundling, and publishing these multi-cloud images in each of the cloud resource pools that we support, including the private clouds. That frees up customers and users of the RightScale platform to have a design once, deploy multiple places type opportunity, and allows for a lot of agility and business benefits to be achieved. The final key component to think about at this abstraction layer is all of the necessary components around security, transparency, and control, whether that's user permissionings, account information, keys, where the data resides. All of that can be governed and managed at this abstraction layer so that you're not beholden to any particular cloud resource pools, policies, or constructs. For example, if you're going to adopt an identity management approach from Amazon in this case, that isn't going to help you when you're looking to manage your hybrid cloud environment with your private cloud resource pools. So there's a lot of security and compliance controls that are built into RightScale to achieve the requirements of our customers. So with that, let's dive in and talk about a demo here. And I'm going to jump over and take a look at the actual RightScale platform. And there's a lot of different use cases that we hear talked about in the press. Things ranging from splitting production from development and test to what people commonly refer to as cloud bursting. But we want to talk a little bit just about a few things here in this demo. We'll talk about how you'd architect across multiple resource pools and how you would take advantage of those multiple pools to do a simple, call it cloud bursting, if you will. So we've now logged into the RightScale system, and I wanted to call your attention to a few key things off the bat. So first is in this top right-hand corner, you see a whole host of different names here. Each of these names corresponds to a specific account or, more specifically, a set of clouds that can be accessed within this given account. So you can see here I have multiple different accounts set up through my login. In this particular account, Hybrid Cloud C, if I go over and take a look at the clouds that are available, you'll notice I have 4 different resource pools from Amazon, and then a private cloud that's running cloud.com. If I was to jump over and take a look at a different account, this publish master, you'll notice here that I don't have access to a private cloud, but just Amazon's 4 different regions. So single interface access to multiple different clouds is one of the first key values that RightScale can provide here. So we're back on this hybrid cloud C interface here. And next thing I want to do is just jump down and show you the available resource here. So this is using a hybrid environment that's accessing the 4 different clouds on Amazon, and then a private cloud that is based on cloud.com. Next, I want to show you a deployment and talk a little bit about the construct here of a deployment. First, you can see at this level, we have this deployment called multi-cloud environment. Think of a deployment as a system. Okay, so it's a multi-server, multi-tier architecture that can be managed as a single entity, including various different automation procedures, storage and backup policies, security, can all be managed at a deployment level. First key benefit about doing this is you can actually get visibility into your consumption tracking at a deployment level. This deployment happens to be costing us 17 cents an hour, and we'll extrapolate that out to various different months and compare against the prior month. Another key feature within RightScale as it relates to private clouds is the ability to do some more sophisticated cost accounting mechanisms where you can actually assign the specific rate on your private cloud that you can use for cross-charging purposes internally. We'll dive deeper into this deployment here in a second, but I wanted to call your attention to this event section. What's happening here is we're in the process now of bursting out to Amazon. So within this demo environment, we have a perf server which is sending synthetic traffic at our front ends, and we have specific automation rules that are set up to take advantage of a resource pool on Amazon as we hit our limits on our private cloud. So we'll see the results of that happening, but I wanted to show you what's going on there off to the left. So let's dive now in and take a look at what this multi-cloud environment consists of. Okay. So this particular deployment is a fixed 4-server cluster. It includes a load balancer. This is an all-in-one load balancer, which includes an Apache front end. There's a MySQL all-in-one, which is a typical LAMP stack. And then finally, we have an application server based on PHP. Each of these servers, you'll notice, gives you the ability to set a nickname. This becomes very important as you're managing more and more resources, which is you can assign tags and nicknames to allow you to easily group logical servers together and understand what's doing what. Secondly, is each of these servers includes a specific server template that is doing all of the dynamic configuration of that instance. If I take a look at this particular server template for the MySQL server, you'll notice here it's configured to run on my private cloud. And if I click on this and take a look at the specific images, you'll notice now here this abstraction concept that I was talking about earlier with RightScale allowing you to define a specific instance, leverage a multi-cloud image. You'll notice how that is presented here, which is this specific server template from MySQL has the ability to run on several different base images. All right, this one, of course, because it's running in a private cloud, happens to be for cloud.com based clouds, but I also have multi-cloud images that are available on Amazon's 4 resource pools as well. So you as a user are not having to deal with creation and bundling and publishing and maintaining those images, which can include a lot of overhead. Anyone that's done that, can appreciate the work that's required there. So jumping back now into this deployment. Oops, excuse me here. We're off to the library here. We'll jump back into this running deployment. The next part of this deployment is this array. And this array is what's bursting into Amazon based on specific automation rules that I have set. And if we go in and take a look at the various different automation parameters that I can set, these include things like the allocation policy. So where do I want to place these resources? It allows you to set certain bookends around how large you want that array to grow. This is what we recommend, by the way, when you are doing cloud bursting, if you will, out of your internal private cloud, because the reality of this kind of seamless overflow is a bit of a technical challenge. But what you can do is actually set defined limits on how big you want your environment to grow, and then access additional resources elsewhere, in this case on Amazon. You also have the ability to set different decision thresholds. So this is a voting process where each instance that's part of that automation that's about to take place has the opportunity to cast a vote and either agree or disagree with what's about to take place. So this prevents your system from kind of holding you hostage, if you will. You can use any of the metrics that RightScale is monitoring to trigger an event. So those can be things like I/O rates. These can be CPU idle. Any metric that you're monitoring at a resource level can be used to trigger these automated actions. And then you can also override it with a simple schedule. So if you know you're going to be doing some development and test and you want quick access to cheap resources in the Amazon public cloud, you can set a schedule to spin up those resources at a specific time of day and day of week. And we see that quite a bit in a lot of use cases around, for example, video encoding or batch processing in the pharmaceutical and financial space, for example, when they know they need to churn through lots and lots of data at a specific time of day, and they just need to get that job done and not consume their internal resources. So lots of different parameters in which you can use to set up the automation rules within your environment. Let's jump back now to this home page on the multi-cloud environment. And you'll notice now here, it looks like we have two instances that are coming up in this burst to Amazon type situation. So just as a reminder here what's going on, all right, we have this load tester, so sending synthetic traffic at the front ends that's running in Amazon, but the rest of our deployment here is running within our private cloud based on cloud.com. We've hit certain thresholds that we've set within RightScale that's causing us now to grow an array of application servers in Amazon. And if I was to jump in now and just take a look at one of these application servers, we can take a look at what's going on here. So we're now in this PHP app server, and I can jump over now and take a look at the monitoring. And this green here represents idle time. So this particular automated action is based on CPU idle rates, and we've set certain limits. So it looks like we ran this test this morning at around 9:40, and it reached its certain limits that caused it to start accessing additional resources within Amazon. Once those resources were accessed, this particular server that's running in our private cloud, the idle time increased as additional resources came online. You can see here now about 20 past the hour when we started this webinar, all right, a job was kicked off to start sending traffic at the front ends. And you'll notice here that the same thing happened again. The load increased, and we started to access additional resources within Amazon, as is evident here when you see this burst to AWS. What's happening during this bursting process is RightScale is making an API call into Amazon, and then that saved server template that was used to launch and manage that internal application server on your private cloud is launching and dynamically configuring that application server on Amazon. So again, this design once, deploy multiple resource pools type ability and behavior that you can do within RightScale. If I take a look at the audits, you'll notice here if you look at some of the timestamps, you can see all these automated actions that are taking place. So here's what we looked at on the graph here. About 19 minutes past the hour, the alert mechanism within RightScale was triggered, okay, and a timestamp was generated, and this action started to take place, and these resources within Amazon started to provision. So with that, I also want to touch a little bit on some of the compliance and security aspects around hybrid cloud deployments. So we're going to jump over now into the settings area, and we'll show you a few key things here. And again, when you're looking at this, think through this platform abstraction layer above these multiple resource pools that you want to deploy on. So we're looking at this publish master enterprise parent account. And Hybrid Cloud C, this account that we've been demonstrating, is actually a child account in this publish master parent. So if you look at this Hybrid Cloud C, there's a couple things to call your attention to. One is you can see the respective active servers. So I, as an admin of these various different accounts, can see exactly what's going on. I have real-time visibility into run rates, so great for cost accounting reasons. I can do things like set quotas and notifications when those quotas are being close to reached. So if I want to, on my hybrid cloud for a specific project team, set certain limits, I have the ability to do that. You also have the ability to set up these private libraries, or what we call sharing groups within RightScale. And these private libraries are ways that you publish configurations into your respective hybrid cloud environments. And we see this very, very commonly used, and it's a big part of driving towards these compliant workloads, because the reality is just because you're moving to a cloud-based architecture, you want to make sure that the software stacks and the systems you're using are pre-built and subject to your internal IT policies. So by using this server template approach, you can create the design at an abstraction layer, lock it down, and then publish it out to the various different groups using these sharing groups. Next, we'll jump over and talk about the hybrid cloud kind of user management controls and access rights here. Here the approach is at an account level down. And the reason being is oftentimes in a hybrid cloud type environment, you're going to have individual users that may be involved with more than one project, but have different rights, roles, and responsibilities on each project. So within RightScale, on each of these different isolated resource pools, so each of these different clouds, you can take a single user, in this case Alex McClure, and assign specific access rights and control procedures around each environment. So you'll notice here Alex only has rights on the publish master account to simply observe the account, whereas on Hybrid Cloud C, Alex can not only design configurations, but he also has the ability to function as a security manager. And that's a very key access right and role that's set up within RightScale, is only security managers have the ability to change, make available, or set things like security groups, so ports that are open or shut, SSH keys. Any of the security sensitive aspects of your deployment can only be set by the security manager. So it gives you a lot of controls and transparency around what's going on. So I hope that helps give you a kind of a high-level look at some of the activity that you can generate here around these hybrid cloud environments. It looks like here this array has grown even further. So now we have this burst to AWS. Looks like we have a bunch of servers running. And you'll notice now, excuse me, the cost has actually doubled. We went from 17 cents an hour to 34 cents an hour during this webinar. We're going to put the bill on Michael, so he's been nice enough to pick it up. But just a very simple example, but hopefully that helped to capture some of the power of doing what people will commonly refer to as cloud bursting. With that, I want to turn it back over to Peter here to wrap things up.
One thing I wanted to add, Josh, great demo, and I think it demonstrates the power of how you can give so much capability to users while ensuring that you're maintaining your own policy based on whether it's cost or compliance rules or even just access in general. One of the things to note that probably doesn't come across in the demo is the fact that the private cloud architecture that we've put in place here in the cloud.com environment, it essentially is a mirror image of what you're running in Amazon. So again, it's maintaining that abstraction so that your users aren't worried about what is the hypervisor I'm running, what is the hardware and network configuration I'm running. We're basically creating an environment, or we're empowering the IT administrator to create an environment that enables your users to essentially have an unlimited pool of resources to run their applications. And by driving that experience through RightScale on top of Cloud.com, they still have control over how they're delivering these services and IT resources to their end users. So let's think about now what this means with regards to how we go about building a hybrid cloud. On one side, companies shouldn't have a cloud computing strategy. They need to have an IT strategy. And cloud computing just becomes another way of actually delivering some of these services. There are certain workloads and certain environments that bode well within cloud computing, and it's all about identifying the right ones that make sense for your organization moving forward. The reality is not all clouds are created equal. There are a number of different providers out there that are providing benefits on top of a base infrastructure as a service type offering. You have commodity-based, mass-produced things like Amazon and other providers out there, to certain service providers that are also offering higher-level services around control, compliance, and security. And in the same sense, you also extend or engage better levels of control and manageability as you bring some of that stuff behind the firewall. So I think it's important to recognize that there's a number of different ways that these things are architected. Now it's about empowering your users with these resources, but abstracting the complexity, making sure that they're completely hidden from the complexity of the different infrastructures. Ultimately, the best thing for users to do or companies to do is really identify use cases. Start small. Right, and when we talk about that, it could be anywhere from if you're in the video world, right? Video encoding in the cloud is a hot topic, or some of these new gaming environments in the cloud is hot. In the same sense, there's a lot of web app development that's happening today, or even some type of simulation that might be happening. These are great prime opportunities for you to leverage the cloud, where you have a very specific use case that you don't necessarily know what your compute demand might be on the back end of that. But it is ultimately about starting small, right, and change your strategy as you learn, as you iterate as you grow with your cloud. I think one of the things, and Josh, you did a great job demonstrating the fact that there's a lot of concern out there around security, control, data integrity. The market is somewhat immature. The reality is there are solutions that get you over that hump, and these should not be things that hold you back. You have to ultimately come back to the reality that clouds are new, clouds are different, and it's about understanding how you can take this environment and use it to extend your existing IT strategy rather than trying to replace your IT strategy with a cloud.
Great. No, thanks, Peter. So with that, let's dive into some questions. So there's been a bunch of questions that have come in. So thank you for that. And again, we'll keep things going. Reminder to everyone, the audio as well as the slides will be available on rightscale.com/webinars. Give us about a day for that. So why don't we first start off, and Peter, I'll kick this one to you, which is, can you first to EC2, so to Amazon EC2 cloud resources with Cloud.com only, or is RightScale required, as we've just demonstrated?
Sure. So multi-cloud management with Cloud.com extending out to a service provider cloud, be it Amazon or a number of public service providers that are actually using our platform, you can do it in a manual fashion. What RightScale actually enables us to do is actually automate some of those processes, creating the policies and the rules that enable the bursting, if you will. And so that's actually where I think there's a lot of layers of integration between the two companies. I don't want to discount anything that RightScale does. The reality is we can't do this hybrid stuff without RightScale. RightScale can't deliver the private side without a private cloud engine running underneath it. I think that's why the two companies together demonstrate the power of this seamless auto-magical bursting capabilities.
Right, and I think just to dive deeper into a couple different key areas there, the reality of all of these different cloud resource pools, again, is they are different. They're different in terms of the underlying hypervisor they're using. They're different in terms of the storage constructs and available resources. They're different in terms of how the networking layers are set up. So what RightScale focuses on with Cloud.com is abstracting away those differences to the end user to allow you to use a single interface, single design methodology, and an automated set of tools and procedures to access more than one resource pool in a very easy and agile fashion. So let's jump into the next one. So there's a question on kind of how do we explain to people who know that VMware, that cloud is more than just hypervisors. So great question. We get that an awful lot. Here's how we recommend you thinking about it. The reality, as Michael articulated on, I think, the first slide of his, is cloud means many different things to many different people. And there are multiple different types of clouds. So software as a service, we're all very familiar with that if you've used Gmail or Salesforce, all the way down to infrastructure as a service. The reality is if you're running VMware internally in your data center, right, that's not a cloud as we would define it within the infrastructure as a service space. The key characteristics around an infrastructure as a service cloud are that it's API accessible, it's on demand, it's pay-as-you-go, and it's virtually infinite. So it's not that running VMware in your internal data center is bad. It's not at all. I mean, there's lots of very relevant use cases where you'd want to continue to use that internal environment. But as far as embracing all the proven attributes of a public cloud like Amazon in a hybrid cloud way, it is very, very, very different. And
actually, to add to that, because we hear a lot of that as well. The reality is hypervisor only gets you so far. And if you think about the fundamental creation and definition of a hypervisor, it does a great job of essentially virtualizing your compute and your memory. And for the most part, was originally designed to run on a single machine to something that might be abstracted across a single cluster. The reality is, from a cloud perspective, you also have to think about what is your network architecture, what is your storage architecture, what is the reality as you start to scale out. You have multiple data centers running a cloud-like environment. And I think these are the things that actually push the limits of traditional data center virtualization, right? And so when you think about it that way, something like a Cloud.com, a private cloud using Cloud.com, builds on top of a VMware. In fact, we work today on both KVM and Zen Server, as mentioned before, but also VMware. So if you're running vSphere and you want to take advantage of elasticity, the agility, the scale out to multiple data centers, that data center API, if you will, that's actually where the Cloud.com architecture starts to extend what you already have within your current data center and enable you to realize the real benefits of cloud computing.
Yeah, and I think the three key things that matter most, but it all starts with one thing, which is what workload are you trying to solve for? Okay, when you're thinking about hybrid cloud, the first question we always ask prospective customers is, fast forward to when you have these environments, what do you want to do with it? And what happens is there are three key things that quickly become very, very apparent in terms of where you need to focus. The networking that you're using, the networking setup, the storage configuration, and the hypervisor, because all of those will directly impact the ability to scale quickly and the economics of your hybrid cloud. So for example, in dealing with a major service provider that RightScale and Cloud.com are working with, it's very important to them that they be attractive to social application customers. So very, very large deployments that are highly elastic. It's very challenging to do that and compete against Amazon's resource pools when you're using VMware and VLANs, for example. Both from an economic standpoint as well as a scalability standpoint, those are very different types of resource pools. They certainly can be supportive, but in terms of attacking that specific use case, it would certainly not be the recommended approach. So hopefully that helps clear things up. Michael, maybe I can kick this one to you. Just as far as the general industry landscapes, what do you see as far as the hypervisor distribution within the marketplace? Which one do you see being most utilized within the cloud space?
Well, within the cloud space, I think what tends to come up within the cloud space, if we throw all clouds together, is you tend to see the open source ones favored, just because the service providers who are running clouds don't want to pay a licensing fee. So they also want to customize it. So I haven't looked at recent data, but last time I looked, the Zen hypervisor was extremely popular. And to be fair, depending on the needs of the customers, there is some pseudo cloud stuff run on VMware in cloud environments. But the majority, if you lump all cloud stuff together, again, people tend to favor open source things. But that skews, again, because it tends to be the cloud providers running versus enterprises running things. And at the moment, as far as looking what private cloud deployments are, I mean, I tend to be, it's so varied that it's difficult to know exactly what's popular. But as in the case of people selling stuff like you guys into the private cloud space, you do tend to favor things that are more malleable and also have a low cost for you guys to use. So that does tend to favor open source again.
Right, thanks, Michael. And I think when we engage with proof of concept customers, Cloud.com and RightScale, our recommendation is always, since you're starting small, start with one of the open source hypervisors if you can, until you learn a bit more about what your end game is. At the end of the day, both RightScale and Cloud.com are completely independent to the networking decisions and the hypervisor you choose to use. They're all supported. It really just becomes an issue of what use case you want to address. Peter, I'll click this one to you, which is the Cloud.com software basically leveling the virtual data center so that it looks like EC2 at an API level?
Sure. So let me take you back to when we were actually first founded, a few years back. Amazon was definitely, and continues to be the leader in public cloud computing, and we saw a huge opportunity for enterprises that wanted to either build their own EC2 behind the firewall for control, or security or compliance issues, but still have that usable functionality, that agility for their end developers or their end constituents. So ultimately, you could answer yes. We are essentially an Amazon layer behind the firewall that enables you to build and manage your own infrastructure, similar to as if it was Amazon. We have built in a number of functionalities that enables us to be completely compatible with the Amazon EC2 and S3 APIs. That said, I also would argue that we have a number of additional features that you might find beyond what you have in an Amazon that is probably more tuned to a private cloud architecture. So, the answer is yes, and then some.
Thanks, Peter. We actually have two questions that are similar in nature relating to billing and cost tracking. One is around, why in the demo was my cloud costs all showing 0? Are they assumed to be sunk, or is there no way to track actual usage of private clouds? And then the second is, I'm assuming you get end bills for end clouds that you use, each addressed to your local user on the end cloud. So yeah, let me elaborate a little bit on that, and actually I'll jump back and refer to this slide as we're talking. So first off, in terms of the consumption tracking, yes, you have the ability within RightScale to track the existing rates from the public cloud resource pools, as well as set up your own custom rates on your private cloud. So what we learned in working with a lot of these hybrid cloud customers is that they had a key need around being able to itemize the cost by workload, and then easily track and assign those costs back to a respective project team or department. So you can set whatever cost you want on a per-hour basis for your private cloud, and then that cost can be depicted and reported within RightScale on an account-by-account basis, and then within each account, specific users have access rights and privileges. So you'll notice here, each of these environments, each of these RightScale accounts has different run rates, and this can all be tallied, and you can run reports off of what each environment is costing you. So yeah, you can set whatever rate you want. It's great for cost tracking, and it actually brings up a funny feedback we've gotten from a lot of these hybrid cloud customers is it's bringing by the hour full transparency into the respective IT costs as it's actually consumed, whereas historically organizations were doing a fairly arbitrary estimation during the budgeting process. So very, very powerful stuff that often isn't shedding a good light on things if you were riding the coattails of some other department. Jump back over here and okay, great. What public cloud providers use cloud.com? So Peter, maybe I'll let you talk about that one.
Let me talk about that one. So we have been in production now for a bit in time, and we have about 35 public cloud providers around the globe running our products. They range anywhere from DigiWeb in Ireland to Tata Communications in India to Korea Telecom, or KT as it's known in Korea. So we have a number of information regarding our public cloud companies coming up on our website shortly, and I would just encourage you to stay tuned as we unveil all of the various public cloud providers that are leveraging cloud.com technologies.
Thanks, Peter. Couple questions on RightScale connecting to the private cloud. So let me jump back and show you here how that works here. So we'll go into the account section. Again, we're in this hybrid cloud environment. So once you've stood up your private cloud based on cloud.com, all right, you have the ability to register that with RightScale. So I'm in the settings area on the account section, and this is where I would add and manage my cloud resource pools. In this particular case, we're going to add a cloud that's based on cloud.com. And through the API keys and the registration URL and the secret key that's provided from cloud.com, you can very quickly and easily add this additional resource pool to RightScale. All right, so again, the process to stand up and register your new resource pool with RightScale is fairly straightforward and also very quick. What happens after that is cloud.com and RightScale will engage with you to help identify and help configure existing settings around what specific workload you're trying to address, because that gets into the server template constructions, the multi-cloud images that we'll make available in that private cloud. As far as securely connecting, you can set this up so that you are connecting to a secure IP within RightScale. And then you have the ability through the security group settings within RightScale that cloud.com supports to set the various configurations around what ports are open and what servers are able to talk to other servers. So next question on pricing again is, why does the pricing for AWS per hour change dynamically? Is it changing as you increase your resource usage per job? Yes, exactly. So what happened during that demo is we were literally launching servers. And because of that, as soon as we make that request and that instance starts booting on Amazon, the meter starts running. So RightScale was immediately recalibrating the run rate of that particular deployment and giving you real-time visibility to what was going on there. So that's why that price was changing, and also a very, very useful tool as you're looking to optimize around specific workloads. So next question around security. Can you define security policies for server templates such as services can only be deployed when they match the customer security requirements? Yes. So let's jump back here and take a look again at the various different constructs here. So a server template, actually, an even better slide, bear with me here. So if we take a closer look at what a server template consists of, okay, it's a lot of predefining, okay, the various different layers of accessing and configuring an instance. So it includes 3 different layers. The first layer is that base image. So that base machine image, again, consists of typically just the OS and the RightScale agent, which is called RightLink. The next layer is where all of the security components are addressed that relate to the specific cloud resource pools. And that is the cloud configuration layer. So those are things like assigning IP addresses, creating security groups, so what ports are open, what ports are talking to others, so on and so forth. All of that can be defined at a server template layer that applies to the specific cloud resource pool that you're deploying on. And then the final layer of the server template consists of the actual configuration of the instance itself. And part of that configuration includes an abstraction layer called RightScale inputs. And those inputs are where you can encrypt things like your SSH keys, your secret keys, and any other secure information that you want to be dynamically passed into the instance during boot or during runtime. So net, in sum, it's not baked into the image. And furthermore, only specific users with the right set of credentials have the ability to access or define those input variables. So you can define a lot of security enhancements at the server template level and do that cross resource pool.
So real quick, Josh, there's a couple of questions that come in specifically as it relates to this bursting and some of the different models around hybrid cloud computing, and it deals specifically with data transfer. Like what really happens as this moves forward. And I think one of the things that's really important to clarify is certain workloads work within a bursting environment, certain workloads don't work within a bursting environment. If you are running an application that is fairly data intensive and you can't afford the latency of having your data far away from your application, that's probably not designed well for the true cloud bursting environment. We do have customers that actually do that. So in the event that you might have a private cloud deployment where you've tested and managed, and whether it's a prototype or a staging server, when you move that workload to the public cloud, you're going to move everything, right? You are moving the application services. You're also moving the storage services. So you're actually replicating what you have already built internally, externally out on that private cloud. That said, in the bursting environment, what happens is, or what we're looking at, are types of applications that are more transactional. The data level that's moving back and forth between the public cloud and private cloud is small enough to where the latency isn't necessarily an issue with regards to having that transactional data move beyond the firewall. So I think it's really important that you identify the right workloads in the right environment. If you're bursting, you're looking at something that might be, you're going to go out and do some data encoding or video encoding in the cloud, or you're doing something that is basically doing some high-level analytics where the transactional data can actually seamlessly move between the two. And I think that's kind of key to call out in this demo.
Absolutely. So, it gets into that area which we spend a lot of time talking to customers about, which is the difference between what's technically possible versus what's practical. Right. And the reality is this seamless overflow, at the end of the day, without question, it's always the database that's the bottleneck. And yes, you can replicate across these resource pools, but you're dealing with latency issues, you're dealing with the time it takes to move the data across, and of course you're dealing with the cost. So particularly if you're moving big files around, you're dealing with substantial bandwidth costs.
Right.
So it really just depends on the use case. But on that note, let's talk about a couple of the things that we see in hybrid cloud. So we see a lot of the split architectures, right? So you're running your production, the split from production versus dev and test. So you're doing your dev and test on the public cloud. Cheap access to resources, quick cycle times with using these server templates, but then you're rolling production internally, or vice versa. We see that quite a bit. Another very practical and common use case is around geolocation of your resources, right? Amazon, you may have strong desires to use Amazon, and that's great. We highly encourage that. But the reality is their clouds are where they are. There are two different areas of the U.S., Ireland, and Singapore. And if you have specific needs, compliance, latency, or otherwise, to have a cloud available in, let's say, Latin America, Brazil, all right, that's a great hybrid cloud use case. Another one is around compliance and security, and we see this quite a bit in the pharmaceutical space as well as the media space, dealing with sensitive video assets, where you may simply want to run a job, even if it's better suited from an architectural standpoint in the public cloud. You don't want to move that data, right? All right, so you're taking your kind of excess capacity jobs, right? Jobs that are using public data sets or less sensitive, and not consuming your valuable internal resources. Instead, you're using public resources to free up as much as you can to run the sensitive data internally. So there are lots of very practical use cases for hybrid cloud, but your point is right on. What's not terribly practical is this seamless overflow when you have a very read and write intensive application, right? Because it's always the database tier where you get the bottleneck.
It's funny because you're right. Bursting is sexy, and a lot of people want to talk about that. But you also got to bring the practical lens in on this as you start identifying those workloads.
Way to be a buzzkill, Peter.
Yeah. Hey,
Next question around server templates. If we change a server template, so for example, app update, while the instances are running, are the instances being updated in any way? Great question. So the answer specifically there is no. Again, a server template is at a layer of abstraction from the instance, so it's a definition. So what happens if you're going to change that server template, and let's show you this exact use case, right, where we're changing the application. So we've done a revision on our application code. So I'll go into a different account here and do production. So let's look at a deployment here, and let's look at a running deployment. So this is a simple scalable web app, and let's go into one of these front ends. So this is using this server template called Rails front end. If I wanted to go and change my application, so I'm doing a revision and pulling down my revised application code, I'd go into the input section, and in this case, I believe we're using Subversion as our repository. Yep, here we are. I would simply click Edit and pull down the new branch of my application code. What happens then is the next instance that's launched is launched and dynamically configured with the updated definition from that new server template. All right, so it captures and allows you to do what we call rolling forward, which is a very key concept within cloud-based architectures and deployments, which is instead of messing with running instances, all right, make whatever design and architectural changes you need to, launch additional instances. When you're satisfied with the results, terminate the old and continue forward with the new. Because the reality of the economics in the cloud is it's far cheaper to just fire up additional instances, do your testing until you're satisfied, as opposed to throwing a lot of bodies at configuring running instances. You can also, within server templates, you can do runtime configuration using operational scripts. So here you're looking at all the various different operational scripts within this particular server template. So when it comes to, applying patches or other common runtime configurations, dealing at this abstraction layer makes it very easy and very efficient to do these necessary runtime configurations.
Now, one of the things with templates, because I saw a question come in earlier that talked about, what's the overhead associated with getting these things up and running. The reality is, by managing your workload and managing your applications via templates, be they in Amazon or within a cloud.com public cloud, the overhead is absolutely minimal. It literally, the system sends out the command, start up this instance, and it should be no longer than 30 seconds, 45 seconds to get the baseline up and running, the basic configuration going. And you even saw as we started bursting that when the trigger hit, it was about a minute between I have no resources to all of a sudden I have another server up and running, or I have another component up and running. And that's going to be the case whether you're bursting to an Amazon EC2 or another public cloud, or instantiating new instances within your public or within your private cloud.
Great. So looks like we got a few more questions here. So next one is around kind of networking configuration. So for the apps that are moved from the private cloud, what happens to the networks those apps are connected to? Is it difficult to network on Amazon? So again, this has a host of things to think about when addressing this question. It starts with how you set up your private cloud. Okay, if you've taken the approach of using a different network configuration than Amazon uses, so for example, VLANs as opposed to the direct networking that Amazon uses with their security groups. It's not that it can't work, but you do need to take that into consideration when you're looking to create these hybrid-type environments. All the governance around the networking settings and how your application behaves when you're taking advantage of more than one resource pool, again, are things that are defined at the server template and specifically the cloud configuration layer within RightScale. So that's another benefit of dealing with this abstraction layer on the RightScale platform, is that you're offloading a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the various differences of how these resource pools are set up to the platform, so that you're just dealing with a common design around that instance configuration with the server template.
So we got a question here. How can you add value to VMware's vCloud infrastructure that customers deploying new VMware versions are using? So let's kind of break down into VMware and some of the things that are happening there. The reality is VMware has a solid cloud orchestration solution, and it works great on top of VMware technologies. I believe that for the most part, for companies that are 100% VMware internally, most likely they're going to take the vCloud instantiation, and that will become their private cloud. There are ways to actually add value on top of that, but I think in today's world, that's still kind of a growing space. That said, a lot of companies are also looking at how they can have a multi-hypervisor strategy, whether that be because of better flexibility, more control, eliminating some of the vendor lock-in by having all your eggs in one basket type of a thing. And there are benefits to other hypervisors out there as well. And one of the things that Cloud.com enables users to do is actually have a completely mixed environment. So you can have VMware vCenter or vSphere running in one of your clusters, and alongside that you can have a KVM or a Zen server cluster, or even a Hyper-V cluster for that matter. And we're able to essentially provide you with one central command and control view into your cloud, and you can basically set different SLAs and quality of service based around the types of offerings that you have. So again, you'll offer your customers a VMware solution at the highest cost, or for those where they don't need all of the feature functionality of VMware, you can actually offer your internal constituents a Zen server or a KVM cluster where it's literally just quick and dirty resources to get their project completed. So I think the value add actually comes when you expand beyond just VMware and actually look for a multi-vendor approach with regards to how you're delivering the cloud.
Yeah, and I think, Peter, it really comes back down to this slide and what we talked about earlier as far as use cases. So again, Cloud.com and RightScale, if you're running VMware as a hypervisor and you want to deploy this hybrid cloud solution, it absolutely will work. It's fully supported. It's a matter of what workload and what business case you're trying to solve for.
Right.
And what we often see is customers deploying both. Deploying Cloud.com and RightScale on VMware EOS X as well as Zen or KVM, because they're addressing very specific needs within different departments. So maybe one more question here, as we're getting close to half past. Well, two more questions. So we have a question that just came in regarding OpenStack. So both Cloud.com and RightScale have publicly announced that we are supportive and very involved in the OpenStack initiative. So the answer is yes on does RightScale and Cloud.com work with OpenStack. OpenStack is not quite as far along as far as what's released on Cloud.com today. So what exactly that will look like and how exactly all these pieces will come together remains to be seen. But Cloud.com and RightScale are fully behind it, and kind of more to come on that. And then last question here, which is how can you pull in capacity information and tie with the business demands and undertake forecasting, i.e., can I set budgets and make sure I have connections in place for my quarter? Well, this is a great point to end on, because it is exactly what this hybrid cloud value proposition is all about, which is you're obviously going to know the parameters around your internal resource pool, how big that is and what you want to use it for. But using this hybrid cloud solution from RightScale and Cloud.com, you have the ability to access the virtually infinite resources of Amazon, that is the undisputed leader and the largest of these infrastructure as a service clouds out there. Without using these tools, it would become very disjointed and very difficult to take advantage of that excess capacity when you need it. But for planning purposes, for example, if you have large workloads you need to run, and we deal with this in a variety of different industries, we deal with it around things like the quarter end and fiscal year end, when companies know they have a lot of resource needs around closing out the books. We'll set up environments and create policies, schedule-based scaling policies that will allow those resources to be available when they need them. We also see a lot of things around media encoding. So specifically when we know events are going to take place and we know a large amount of content is going to need to be encoded and transcoded, those environments will be made available and set to run, again, in Amazon based on a specific time of day and day of week to complement what's already running on your hybrid cloud. So that's exactly what it's all about, kind of stitching those together.
adding to that, Josh, I mean, you bring up the great point of what what you have capabilities of with Amazon, where you are setting policies. It is usage-based. You have all of those pieces in place. This also kind of exemplifies why virtualization doesn't mean private cloud, right? Because ultimately you need a lot of that business logic internally. So not only setting up and having the resource pool, but also automating and setting policies around who uses it, how they use it, when it's available, and make sure that you aren't oversubscribing to certain extents. And I think those are some of the things that we're exposing in our API layer to RightScale, so that the same policy configuration and management that you can do within the public cloud, you're now able to do within the private cloud as well. And I think that's absolutely key when thinking about the economics, the management, and just the general day-to-day use of a private cloud is.
Great. So just some parting notes here. We want to reiterate here, start small, but we encourage you to start sooner rather than later. Hopefully most of you on this call share this opinion, which is the cloud is here to stay. We're past the hype, and just take a look at the press or refer back to the earlier slide of some of those marquee customers who are running production deployments in the cloud today. A lot of things are happening, and we encourage you to start sooner rather than later. It may sound like an awkward pitch from a couple of vendors, but it really is about standing up a proof of concept and just starting a project first, and then giving yourselves the education and the transparency to learn where to go next. So we have a very simple way to do that. We encourage you to just go download the Cloud.com software. So it's on their site. It is open source, so it's free to try out. Just get a couple boxes and go ahead and install it. And then register that with RightScale. If you have trouble doing that on your own, just drop us a note, give us a call, and we'd be more than happy to help you do that. And then schedule an evaluation for a proof of concept. And what this will include is Cloud.com and RightScale engaging with you around a specific use case. So tell us what problem you're trying to solve for, and we'll work with you to build a showcase environment that can help you sell internally. Because we appreciate and realize that often can be the biggest challenge here, is evangelizing and selling hybrid cloud solutions internally within your organization. So give us a shout. We're happy to do that. We're going to sign off now, but just as a reminder, this webinar will be available, audio and slides. Give us about a day at rightscale.com/webinars. And feel free to contact any one of the three of us here, Redmonk, Cloud.com, or RightScale at the contact info you see there. With that, I want to thank my respective panelists here. So Peter, thank you, and Michael, thanks for joining us. Everyone on the call, I hope you all enjoyed this and found it informative. And we're going to sign off now. So bye for now, and until next time.